How did one of Europe's dream destinations become one of its biggest cautionary tales? Not long ago, Portugal was the place everyone wanted to be. Warm weather, low prices, endless sunshine. A place that promised peace without the price tag of Paris or London. Foreign investors poured in, digital nomads swapped skyscrapers for surfboards, and retirees called it paradise on earth. But for the people who actually live there, that paradise has turned into something else. 10 years ago, a home in Lisbon cost a fraction of what it does today. Now, even a small flat can cost more in a single year than most locals earn in 2. The same streets that once filled with music and laughter have become scenes of protest and frustration. How did a country that seemed to have it all, safety, beauty, affordability, become one of Europe's hardest places to live? The answer isn't simple. It's not just about housing or money, it's about how a nation rebuilt itself out of hope, only to slowly sell off the very things that made it special. Step by step, Portugal traded identity for investment, control for comfort, and sovereignty for survival. To understand how paradise became pressure, we have to go back to where the dream began, when everything still felt possible. Portugal's modern story begins with freedom. In 1974, after nearly 50 years of dictatorship, the country was reborn through the Carnation Revolution, a peaceful uprising that gave people democracy for the first time in generations. But freedom came with challenges. Portugal was poor, isolated, and decades behind its neighbours. Then came Europe's helping hand. The European Union poured in funds, rebuilding the country from the ground up. Roads replaced dirt tracks, schools and hospitals opened, bridges connected cities that were once cut off. For a while, life felt full of momentum. People believed the future had finally arrived. The 1990s and early 2000s brought a new wave: modernization and globalization. Portugal began to sell its charm to the world. Lisbon was rebranded as Europe's hidden gem. Porto's riverbanks filled with tourists. The Algarve transformed into a coastal playground for northern Europeans. Tourism quickly became the lifeline of the economy. Hotels, restaurants, construction, everything revolved around visitors. By 2005, the industry was creating thousands of jobs and shaping government policy. For a while, it felt like a golden age. The country marketed itself as modern, peaceful, and cheap, a friendly paradise. But beneath the beach sunsets and fado music, Portugal was changing in a dangerous way. It wasn't building industries, it was building dependence. The economy became one-dimensional, thriving only as long as tourists kept coming. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit, that illusion of stability collapsed overnight. Construction froze, unemployment soared, Portugal's fragile balance shattered, and that's when the government made a deal that would shape the next decade, trading safety for survival. To pull the economy back from disaster, Portugal tried something bold and risky. In 2012, the government launched the Golden Visa program, offering residency to wealthy foreigners who invested in property. The pitch was simple: bring your money, buy a home, and get a European visa in return. At first, it worked beautifully. Investors from China, Brazil, Russia, and the US flooded in. Lisbon's old houses were renovated into luxury apartments. Porto's quiet streets turned into property showcases. Money flowed, jobs returned, and politicians celebrated. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Within a decade, property prices in major cities skyrocketed by over 250%. Locals were priced out of their own neighborhoods. Middle-class families couldn't even imagine buying homes. Many buildings sat empty, investment shells flipped again and again while actual residents vanished. The government hailed billions in new foreign capital, but the wealth barely touched ordinary lives. The benefits of the boom were confined to a small circle, while everyone else faced soaring rent and shrinking options. Tourism magnified the crisis. Short-term rentals, powered by Airbnb, swallowed entire districts. By 2024, more than 1 in every 10 city homes was for visitors. In some Lisbon neighborhoods, it was over half. The result was surreal. Locals serving food and cleaning rooms for tourists in cities they could no longer afford to call home. Portugal had built a paradise for everyone except the people who lived there. And while the dream glimmered for travelers, everyday life for residents was quietly breaking down. Ironically, the same country that opened its doors to investors became known for closing them on ordinary workers. For decades, Portugal's migration policies were praised as open and human. Students, farmers, and labourers came from Brazil, Nepal, India, and West Africa seeking a better life. But by the mid-2020s, the system began to fail. In 2023, the old immigration agency, SEF, was replaced by AIMA, a new department meant to fix inefficiency. Instead, it created chaos. Files piled up and more than 400,000 people were trapped in bureaucratic limbo. Some waited years for basic documents, unable to rent, open bank accounts, or even keep their jobs. Then the government made things worse, abruptly ending the expression of interest rule that allowed migrants to work legally while waiting for approval. In a single announcement, thousands fell into legal grey zones, unable to leave, unable to move forward. Meanwhile, the government introduced new golden tier visas for wealthy digital nomads, offering tax breaks to earners making 4 times the national wage. The contrast was impossible to miss. In the countryside and construction zones, migrant workers continued long hours in poor conditions. 10 people might share one small apartment. Many earned below minimum wage but couldn't complain. The cost of being visible was too high. Portugal's story of openness was starting to sound hollow. It had built its global image on hospitality, but that warmth now felt selective, and frustration was spreading fast among immigrants, among locals, and across the fragile social fabric binding them together. From the outside, Portugal looked unstoppable. Tourism records kept breaking. International media called it Europe's comeback kid, and tech investors named Lisbon the new startup capital of the Atlantic. For those reading headlines, it was a dream comeback. But ordinary life told another story. Half the workforce earned less than €1,000 monthly, while rent in Lisbon hovered around $1,500. Wages stayed flat, but essentials soared. Groceries, gas, electricity, everything cost more. Inflation cooled statistically, but in everyday life, nothing really got cheaper. For families, budgeting wasn't about saving, it was about surviving. Many couples spent over half their income just keeping a roof overhead. Young people stayed with parents into their 30s, not out of comfort, but necessity. Starting a family felt impossible. Birth rates hit record lows and emigration quietly returned. Meanwhile, the jobs fueling this so-called recovery were precarious, seasonal, freelance, or temporary. Service workers, tour guides, cleaners, and delivery drivers carried the economy but could rarely afford to enjoy the cities they kept alive. Tourism, which once promised opportunity, now locked people into low pay and long hours. The smiling brochures hid exhaustion. And yet, the national profits looked good because they weren't staying in Portugal. Wealth was flowing outward. The country was working harder than ever, just not for itself. When the bills came due, Portugal reached for quick money again, but this time it wasn't homes being sold, it was heritage. Decade after decade, the nation's core industries changed hands. Fidelidade, the country's oldest insurer, sold. EDP, the energy provider, sold. Shares of infrastructure and construction firms, gone. Each sale brought a short-term win and a long-term problem: loss of control. Decisions once made in Lisbon were now made in Shanghai or New York. Profits that had sustained communities now disappeared abroad. When energy prices rose, citizens wondered why their national company no longer served national interests. Politicians spoke of globalization, but to many it felt more like surrender. Portugal hadn't just opened its borders, it had auctioned off its backbone. And soon that loss of ownership began to show up in other places too. Politics, infrastructure, and even trust itself. In 2025, the cracks reached the surface. The first blow came with a massive blackout. 10 hours without power across most of the mainland. It exposed just how fragile the energy grid had become, pushed beyond its limits and dependent on systems Portugal no longer fully controlled. Overnight, the nation's modern image dimmed. Literally. Then came scandal. Reports tying the Prime Minister to real estate interests triggered outrage and protests. Trust in government hit an all-time low. Across the streets, different movements erupted: far-right protests demanding tighter borders, leftist rallies calling for housing reform. For the first time in decades, unity was gone. Chega, the rising far-right party, blamed immigrants. Others blamed investors. Some just blamed the system. But one thing united almost everyone: the feeling that the Portuguese dream was slipping away. It was no longer about politics, it was about survival in a country people barely recognized. Once known for calm and kindness, Portugal now wrestled with anger and division. By the end of that year, one word echoed everywhere: crisis. For decades, Portugal was Europe's peaceful success story, proof that small nations could thrive through charm and balance. But that balance has broken. Behind postcard-perfect views lies a country where locals compete with tourists for rent, where public companies serve private investors, and where young people wonder if their only option is to leave. And none of it happened in one big betrayal. It was the sum of small, reasonable decisions, each made for progress. Invite investors, encourage tourism, sell what isn't working, fix problems fast. Each step sounded smart, until the pieces stopped fitting together. Portugal bought time with its future. It turned quick fixes into habits, and now the cost is everywhere. Unaffordable homes, shrinking wages, aging villages, and trust that's almost gone. Yet amid frustration, there's still resilience. Protests grow louder, voices are demanding reform, and people are asking the one question no policy can dodge. Who is Portugal really for? The Portuguese dream isn't gone, but it's fragile, hanging between memory and reality. And whether it can survive depends on whether the country chooses to build again for its people or keeps selling the pieces of its soul to stay afloat. Because somewhere between boom and burnout, paradise turned into a warning, not just for Portugal, but for every nation chasing prosperity without protection.